This is the Coleman 2-person pop-up tent, and in this video, we'll be testing its ease of setup, ease of takedown, spaciousness, comfort, ventilation, and more. I bought this Coleman pop-up tent from Amazon and got the tent inside a carry bag, plus 8 stakes and some instructions. The 2 guidelines are pre-attached. I'll put affiliate links below if you want to check this out. To set up this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent, first take the tent out of the carry bag, remove the black strap, and toss the tent away from you while it pops up. This takes just 15 seconds. Next, zip the window and door up and stake down the tent with 6 of these loops, 3 at the right and 3 at the left. Then guy out the tent with the 2 pre-attached guy lines. This takes another minute and 15 seconds, so altogether the entire setup can take as little as 1.5 minutes. To take down and pack up this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent, first remove all the stakes, then unzip both the window and door panels. Then fold the tent until it looks like a taco and stand it up on one end. Reach out as far as possible to this end of the taco and fold it down towards you. At the same time, quickly kneel on the ground using one of your knees to press down on that end that you've just folded in. Then push the rest of the poles down and together until the tent folds back into the smallest circle. Place the black strap back across the tent and pack it up along with the stakes. The entire pack up takes just 1 minute and 45 seconds for me, and if you don't use the stakes and guidelines, it can take as little as a minute and 15 seconds. For more tips on how to set up and take down this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent, you can check out this video on my channel. For spaciousness, I looked at the base area as well as the height inside the tent. The Coleman 2-person pop-up tent has a longest length of 91 inches and a longest width of 54 inches, but just take note that the base area is like an oval shape. When I inflated my X-Bed Megamat Duo 10 inside this Coleman pop-up tent, which is the size of 2 regular pads put together, it fit just nicely into the tent. The corners of my X-Bed Megamat Duo were touching the side of the Coleman pop-up tent, so it probably can't fit anything longer or wider. But I did have some leftover space inside for a little bit of camping gear. When I tried to inflate an almost full-sized Coleman quick bed inside this Coleman pop-up tent, it was definitely a bit squashed. One side of the quick bed was okay, while the other side couldn't be fully inflated, like here. You can still use it though, but you wouldn't have much space left over for camping gear. Also, there's no vestibule, so if you leave your shoes out, it will get wet if it rains. The peak height at the center of this Coleman tent is about 32.5 inches. When I sat naturally with a little bit of slouch on my X-Bed Megamat, which has about 4 inches of loft, my head didn't touch the top of the tent, but it does hit the top of the tent when I sit upright though. With the Coleman quick bed though, which has a thickness of about 8 inches, it definitely felt a little bit more claustrophobic inside the tent. Even when I sat naturally and not even upright, my head still touched the top of the tent. For comfort and features, I looked at the door, window, and storage options. The Coleman 2-person pop-up tent has a single door at the front length of the tent. It measures about 34.5 inches in length and 26 inches in width, and it's pretty much a circular shape. If you don't want to use the door, you can just zip up the window mesh panel instead for more ventilation, and this inner window measures about 30 inches in length and 13 inches in width. But just bear in mind that if you're inside the tent and you want to zip up the door, you first have to unzip the window to do so. Both the door and window have 2 zippers each, and each zip can be opened from both the outside and inside. This Coleman 2-person pop-up tent comes with these latches that you can use to tie both the door and window up for maximum ventilation. If you want to use only the window, you can tie the door up with the same attachment, and if you want to use only the door, I usually tie the window up like this. There's one pocket inside this pop-up tent which is split into 2. The pocket measures about 16 by 8 inches. There's no lantern loop inside this tent, but you can hang a lantern up using the window and door latch attachment. You can hang a lantern up with both the window and door open, with just the door closed, or with just the window closed. You can also use the zipper if you want to, but I don't usually because I don't want to put too much strain on the zipper. For ventilation, I looked at hot day and rainy day options. On a hot day without any rain, you can take the rainfly off entirely without even having to remove the guideline stakes. To remove the rainfly, all you have to do is to unhook the 4 S-hooks at the front of this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent, like so, then undo the Velcro attachments near the guidelines and then sweep the rainfly to the back like this. At the back of the tent, you can tie the rainfly up using these attachments, or you can just leave it like this. I usually leave it like this because I'm lazy. Just take note that you cannot remove the rainfly entirely because it is attached directly to the tent right here. On a hot day with the rainfly removed and the door completely open, there's actually quite a bit of ventilation from the ceiling mesh and the door. However, on a rainy day, you do need the rainfly to be in place and the door to be closed. There are also no vents, so there's hardly any ventilation when it's raining. For condensation, I slept in this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent on my own overnight with the rainfly in place and the door closed. It didn't feel too stuffy during the night, and I don't think I noticed any condensation issues the next morning, but it did rain occasionally during the night, so water got into my tent. So I decided to rain test this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent as well. I used this water hose to kind of simulate heavy rain, which looked like this. Also, I used a stopwatch to time exactly how long I was rain testing this pop-up tent. At about 15 minutes into the rain test, I stopped to check in on the tent. Even though I did my best to not let the door droop into the tent, I noticed so much leaking from just the door itself. There was so much leaking that there were big puddles on the floor from the door. On the inside of the Coleman pop-up tent, I noticed that quite a bit of water had started seeping in through the seam between the flooring and tent body, even though it had been taped. I also found that both the green and white tent fabric have been soaked through after just 15 minutes of heavy rain. And what's worse is that the rain cover for the door zip had also been completely soaked through. All the water is like stuck in here. One more thing I noticed was that there was some water on the ceiling mesh of the tent, and it dripped down onto the floor too, right here. So I decided to check the rainfly as well. After I unhooked the S-hooks and lifted the rainfly, I found that the underside of the rainfly was already wet and the entire rainfly had already been soaked through. I also rain tested my Coleman 4-person pop-up tent through light rain, and I'll link the full rain test video on my channel here. The Coleman 2-person pop-up tent has only 2 guy lines. When I guyed out the tent and tried to shake it, it wasn't the most stable, but it was okay. The peak height isn't too high, so it would probably be able to take light to moderate winds. The Coleman 2-person pop-up tent has flooring that doesn't feel like polyethylene. My guess is that it's polyester, though I could be wrong. It doesn't feel as thick and rugged though. The rest of the tent is made of 68D polyester. Most of the seams in the tent have been taped, but some parts of the seam tape weren't very well applied, like this part here, which was probably a big reason as to why the seams were leaking in my rain test. The stitching around the tent is double stitched and consistent for the most part, but I did find some inconsistent stitching and loose threads around the tent. The zippers don't feel super smooth, and I noticed some tension while trying to zip the door and window up. This is why I highly recommend staking down the tent only after you've already zipped the door and window up so you don't add more tension to the zips. The poles were made of fiberglass, and I've been using this tent lightly over the past couple of years with no issues at all. The carry bag is pretty good quality. It's the perfect size for the packed up tent and comes with a pocket for your stakes. For portability, this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent has a packed size of 29 by 29 by 3 inches, which is quite thin. For a size comparison, here's what it looks like beside a Coleman 2-person sundome tent, as well as a 32-ounce Nalgene bottle, and it weighs about 5.4 pounds for just the tent and carry bag alone without the stakes. With the 8 stakes, it'll weigh about 6 pounds. The carry bag also comes with a handle at the top for easy carry. For pros, I found the Coleman 2-person pop-up tent really easy to pop open in just 15 seconds because the poles and rainfly are pre-attached. The guy lines and tensioners are also pre-attached, but you don't have to use them if you don't want to. Packing up the Coleman pop-up tent takes less than 2 minutes, but honestly, it takes some practice to get used to it. The first time I used this pop-up tent, my knee was bruised because I struggled to get it back in. The Coleman pop-up tent also has a decent amount of ventilation on hot days because of the ceiling mesh, and I also found it very inexpensive. If you found this helpful so far, please help me hit that like button, thank you, and I really appreciate it. As for cons, the biggest one is that it's definitely not weather resistant. Just 15 minutes of heavy rain got my Coleman 2-person pop-up tent completely soaked through. Also, the door design is definitely not great for rain. Another con is that it's definitely not the most spacious. The peak height is pretty low at 32.5 inches for a 2-person tent, and it can't really fit a full-size mattress. It does fit 2 sleeping pads though, or a double pad, but that's about it. Also, there aren't enough storage options like lantern loops, and the pocket is really small for a 2-person tent. The quality is okay, but definitely not the best. I found loose threads around the tent, the flooring doesn't seem very thick, I noticed some tension while trying to zip the door and window up, and some parts of the seam tape weren't very well applied. But overall, I think you do get what you pay for, and more. It's a perfectly functional tent for a very inexpensive price, and I found that this Coleman pop-up tent is definitely a great budget option for backyard camping in the summer. With clear skies, at least you can run indoors when it starts raining. How does this Coleman 2-person pop-up tent compare to other pop-up tents or other Coleman tents? Well, don't worry, because I've already done a comparison for you in these videos. I'll put them up when they're ready, so do check those out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.